So I started my project with three major pieces. The intro, where I introduce the project or introduce the theme of the essay. Then I have the middle part, where I have the contents, the body of the production. And then at the end, I have a little conclusion and a little area where I sort of sum up what's happening in this case, what's happening with sternwheelers on the Arrow Lakes in the Kootenays at the end of the production. So let's start with the intro. In the intro, as you notice, I have, for instance, a few things happening. I have some titles coming on and off the screen. I have an image right here that I have a filter on. You can see here there's a kind of a sepia filter, kind of an old movie look. If I play that, you can see that it's playing back. It's got a little bit of flashing happening as if it's done with an old camera. If I click on the picture in the timeline in the main video track, you'll notice there's the picture sitting on screen with no filters. And what I did is I added a filter to this clip. You can always tell with filters on these clips by these little icons on the side here. You can see right in this area here. If I double click on this clip, on this photo rather, you'll notice that the panel opens up with attributes and some of the photo options that I have. You can see here that I've got a couple of filters attached. To add a filter, I go into the FX tab and I can just drag these on to the clip itself. In this case, I've dragged two filters on, a brightness and contrast filter and an old film filter. It also makes a difference when you have the filters happening at different order within this tree. You can add multiple filters together. You can have filters occur before other filters to give you a different effect. In this case, for instance, I have a brightness and contrast filter. And I wanted to sort of boost up the brightness and the contrast and adjust it a bit within here. So what I did is I dragged it onto the clip, and then I went up and saw this in the menu under the Attributes tab. And if I hit Customize Filter, you'll notice now right away that I have a before, the current photo, and an after. I can go in here and just scrub through here, and you can notice that it does basically not change at all. So I've made my keyframes, where the filter can change at the beginning and at the end. I've made them the same. You can change those if you like. You can go in here in the middle, for instance, and add a keyframe using the plus, and then bump up the brightness in this case. You can see how it gives you a real-time preview of what happens with that filter. Once I say OK, that will be adopted to the clip, and you'll notice that right away it made a difference here. So if I scrub through here, you'll notice that there's the brightness boosts up a bit in the center, and then it goes back down again. Let me double click on that clip one more time and show another filter. This filter is very popular. It's called Old Film. In productions like this, where you rely on a lot of old archival footage and archival photographs, you want to be able to have a look that as if somebody was shooting it with a camera at that time, a video camera, a film camera. That gives a little bit more excitement to a slideshow. So I'll go to my Old Film filter, and again I will select it and hit Customize. Now if I hit play over here on the play button, you'll notice that there's scratches, there's flashing happening on the screen. Very much like an old style camera, as if the film has been damaged. I can go in and adjust those parameters as well. So if I go back to the beginning here on my first keyframe, you'll notice that there's a setting for dust, scratch, shock, which is the shock of the light, and light variance, so how the light goes up and down. So I can go in here and say, for instance, I picked a sepia tone. I can go in and click on the color tab and pick any other tone. So say maybe a little lighter sepia. And then you can see it's changed right away. I can add more scratches to look a lot more damaged, add more dust. And then if I hit play, you'll notice there's a lot more dust and scratches happening there. Once I'm done, I can say OK. So now those filters are attached to that photo. The photo has not been changed. These filters overlay the photo itself. So if I scrub through here, you'll notice, there we go. There's a filter of the background. So it gives you kind of a nice way of doing effects on photos, and it takes it away from a boring slideshow to more of a video presentation. In the VideoStudio timeline, you'll notice I have my whole project here, all 3 minutes of it. I can go in and zoom using the zoom buttons here. Let me just zoom in a bit here, back to the beginning. So now it's a little bit more zoomed into an area on the timeline. You'll notice at the beginning, coming into this first clip, I have a transition. And this transition, again, just as I mentioned before with the effect, I can drag the transition in from the transition palette. I'll go up into my tabs and I'll click on the transition palette. and I've got 3 favorites picked here. These are ones I use quite a bit, so I dragged them into favorites. I can go into all of the transitions. You'll notice we have quite a large variety. I can go to all of my transitions, and they all preview here within the transition area. So I can just click on each one to see what it looks like. If I like one of these transitions, I can go in and add it to my favorites, so I don't have to keep wading through all these transitions. For example, this burn transition here, which is kind of a bonanza effect, I can right-click on that and say Add to my favorites. Now, when I go back to my favorites, you'll notice now the burn is part of my favorites. So this is very good when you go to use transitions and you have a lot of different tools and you want to keep those as favorites. You can just put them into a favorites category. So in this case here, all I did was I dragged down the transition into the timeline, and I dragged it between a first black clip, which I put in here. I always start with the black clip. You can start with color bars if you like or whatever, but I usually start with the black clip, allowing me to fade from black to the primary video, in this case the picture. The transition I've selected here is a cross dissolve. I use that quite a bit. If I double click on that, you'll notice that the cross dissolve transition dialog comes up, and I can go in here and change the timing. And in this case, there's not a lot you can change with a cross dissolve. It's very basic, but some transitions have a number of variables in this area here where you can change, for instance, colors of backgrounds. In this case, the slide. You can change the color of the bar to not green, something else. So every transition has its own settings, just as every effect has its own settings. So as I'm scrubbing through here, you'll notice it goes from black, fades, and fades to the picture with its filters. The next thing I did was added titles. So in this case, I wanted to sort of start off with a couple of basic titles. I have one here, for instance, in the late 19th century, the Kootenay region of British Columbia boomed with gold and silver. So what I wanted to do was use a color that was very similar to the sepia tone, gave it kind of an old style effect, late 19th century effect, and use a font that is more reminiscent of the 1890s. So fonts, for instance, because this is a production that uses a lot of different pieces, you can get fonts from all over the place. I have a number of fonts installed that came with CorelDRAW, for instance, that I have on this machine. But you can also use TrueType fonts that you've downloaded from the web or you've purchased on a DVD or a CD. Those fonts will all show up in the titling dialog. So to do titles, the way I did these titles, very straightforward. I just double click on this title. I'll show you how it's sort of assembled. You'll notice that the selector here for the title has been opened. If I go in, I can go in and select the text and type whatever I like here. If I like that, I'll put it back to the correct word. I can go in and change the colors if I block this off. You'll notice that now that the title is open, I have the title attribute area open. And you'll notice here's my font. The fonts, whatever's on your machine, the font will show up within this drop-down list here. It'll give me the title duration, in this case 7 seconds. Bold, italic, all the parameters of a font, as well as orientation. You can change the font to go vertical if you like. You can have multiple titles on the screen at the same time, single title. You can have a text backdrop if you like. So there's a number of variables here, alignment variables. You can all put those onto the screen here. I kept it very simple. I don't like having the production get taken away with visual effects, so I wanted to keep it very simple, very straightforward. So I used this Opera font with this beige coloring. Now the other thing I did is I wanted these fonts to be able to fade on. In some cases, you'll want it to come on very as a cut, but in this case, I wanted to have it fade on and add a little bit of drama to that. So to do that, I just select my font again, just right there, and you'll notice that it's selected here. I can go in here and say double click, and I can go into the attribute area, and you'll notice here that there's animation. I have a number of different types of animations that I can use, and each animation has its own settings. So for instance, I've selected fade, and if I click on the customize animation, you'll notice here that is the unit that fades is the text. You could change that to line, word, character if you like. The amount of pause, and this is this blue area here. While I have the title clip selected, this blue area is where the pause occurs. After these orange markers is where the effect will occur. So in this case, the effect occurs at the first quarter second or so and fades on. It pauses for this blue area, and then at this orange marker, then it fades off. You can play that and preview that here as well. So I have it selected for crossfade, so let me just cancel that. If I scrub through here, you'll notice that it's fading off, fading on. One important piece within VideoStudio is you have these two modes. You have a project mode and a clip mode. Right now I have the title clip selected, so it automatically goes to clip mode here. So if I hit play or repeat, it will only repeat in that one clip. If I went up to project, you'll notice it'll change a bit. Now this is the entire project, so I can hit play. You can play segments of your project if you wanted to just limit it to playing a previewing a segment by dragging these orange markers. You'll notice all of a sudden now the timeline changes and I'm dragging these orange markers around, and it will only preview within that orange area. Okay? So as you see, I've got a number of titles. One of the things that's nice about VideoStudio, allows you to work quickly and to be able to copy and paste things. So in this title here, I really like what I did here. So rather than do that every single time, which is really time consuming and tedious, what I did is I made one title and I copied it. Once I had the effect down and the coloring and the font and everything, the placement, I made one title and I right clicked and I said copy. Now this title has been copied, so I can put that at the end here, and it's exactly the same as the original title, but now I can change the text if I like. Okay? Very simple. So copying is a very, very handy way of working around the timeline. The other thing you can do is not just copy a title, you can copy the attributes of a title. So if I go in here to this title and I right click, you'll notice here it says copy attributes. So I'll go to copy attributes. Now what happens is the attributes of this title, the position, the color, the font, all of those things, the alignment, are all copied into the clipboard. Then I can go to a title and I can paste those attributes to the next title if I like. And that's how I can do that as well within this timeline. Titles can also be dragged around the different tracks. We have two dedicated title tracks, T1 and T2. You can just keep your titles in those, as I have here, or you can drag them into the overlay tracks. The advantage of this is that you can put graphics in front of the titles. So for example, I'll take this graphic here and I'll drag it down in here, and you'll notice that it will happen in front of the title. So you can see the transportation links there with a steamboat coming through. It's happening on top of the title. So that's the advantage. Let me go undo that. Undo, we have undo, redo buttons, Control Z if you like to be able to put that together. Now as I go through here, I've got my title sequence happening in that area here. And I've also added a clip here, and this will be a little bit more obvious later on. This clip right here is a transparent clip that I made. It's a color clip, and we have color clips up here on the top. So I go in here and see color clips, these different color clips. I drag the color clip to be able to give a consistent transparency, a consistent brightness to all the photos that I'm using in the main timeline track. So this sort of deadens them all. Rather than having to adjust each one separately, what I did is I basically made this clip and put it over top and set up a transparency. So let me just, again, double clicking on that clip, and you'll notice here that I've got old film stuck onto this clip, so it'll overlay over the other ones. I also have set up a transparent capability on here, so you can see, for instance, my transparency is set at 34%. I can go and change that if I like throughout the production process to be able to get exactly what I want. But you'll see here that you can't see this clip. It just adds a little bit of, deadens the brightness and the contrast of the background clips. And as I scrub through the production here, you'll notice that I've got more titles happening, and I've got the same sort of thing, fade on, fade off. I keep it simple, not to overproduce. And so here I have titles, Stern Wheelers of the Air Lakes. If I double click on that, I wanted this to be aligned in the center, so I just hit this alignment, and I can put it into the center there. Notice there's the clip right in the center. I can go in here and double click on it again, and I can actually move it if I want. I can move it up here. I can also grab this little blue piece here to adjust the shadow, or the pink handles to be able to adjust the rotation. Again, we have undo buttons here. So as I'm working through my essay, the next effect I wanted to have was I wanted to have the dates, because this goes through the dates of the era that I'm discussing. So here I have the dates. Now you'll notice in the titles here it says 1890, 1891, 1892, and so on and so forth. What you can do is you can do the title here, you can make it here, or you can import a list to be able to use it as a title. That imported list is called a subtitle. So one way of doing that is to basically put a title into your timeline and then save a subtitle file. Now the subtitle file, if I go here, if I click on that, the subtitle file will come in, will be exported as a UTF file. This is a standard subtitling format. This format is used in television programs to be able to subtitle with different languages, and we support that within this software. It's also very handy as a teaching method to be able to have your narration followed by a subtitle within the title track. So to do this, I would just go in here and say subtitle, sub dates, and I would export it. Make sure I'm in the right spot here. Yes, I'll put the links. And then the subtitle type is UTF format, language English. The difference here is that we will export in different character sets. If you wanted to have Chinese, Greek, we can actually export in dual byte, as opposed to English, which is a single byte character set. And it will also ask you how you want to export from which track. So in this case, I want to export from track number 2. So I'll go down here and export from track number 2. Once I've saved that file can be opened within a word processor, like a WordPad that comes with Windows. You'll go inside there and you can use tabs and all the character sets that you want, all the character attributes that you want to do, as well as the spacing. And then you go in here, and once you're finished with that, you say Open Subtitle File, and say, for instance, there it is. And I can say, for instance, what font I want it to come in as. Subtitling is a bit of an art. Be able to pick the correct font and the correct placement. In this case, Russell White is the font that I'm using. You can pick whatever font you want here. The size, you don't want your subtitles to be overwhelming if you're doing subtitling. In this case, I wanted them to be big, so I had this effect of these dates coming by, as well as the leading, as well as where to import them into track number 2 or into track number 1, dedicated title tracks. We can add glowing and this sort of thing. This is very, very handy. At Corel, we do all of our subtitling using VideoStudio, and we have tutorial videos in 11 languages. We have 15 videos in 11 languages. And this is a very handy way of being able to localize a video and make training materials available to in different languages, being able to be streamed across the web in different nations. So I have that, and I'd import that, and then what would happen is I'd get this title track coming in here. One of the effects I did with this title track, if I double-click, as I showed you earlier, to be able to see how these titles work, obviously the whole title is not on screen, it's just the dates I wanted to show. I would go up here, double-click on there, and I would show you that I'm using a fly transition now, an animation that will move from right to left, and it'll pan across the screen. And as you stretch your subtitle out longer or your title out longer, that animation will take longer. So if you stretch it over 1 second, it'll blow by on the screen. If you stretch it over a minute, it'll go by quite slow. And I wanted it to come across in this production to go relatively slowly to show you the years that these sternwheelers operated on the Arrow Lakes. Say OK. So now you'll notice if I scroll through here, 1890 comes through, 1891, so on and so forth. The next thing I did is you'll notice that there is a sternwheeler on the screen here. This sternwheeler, if I double click on that, is a PNG file, which basically allows me to go into PaintShop Pro, mask out an area in PaintShop Pro. For instance, out of an old picture I took this sternwheeler, and then save it as a PNG file, which gives me a transparency in the background. Once you bring that file into VideoStudio, you'll have a transparent background where this sternwheeler can be overlaid over a background. And then in this case here, I can also animate it. So what I've done here, and you'll notice when I double-clicked, the panel came over of the attributes of this particular clip. You'll see here that I have a direction and a style for movement. So I wanted it to come on from the right, and I want it to leave from the left. Also, just as in titles, we have the duration marker here. So if I wanted it to come on and stay on for a couple of seconds, I would just drag the duration markers out. If not, and I just wanted it to come breeze through the the moment without stopping, I would just make that pause duration 0. In this case here, you can see that, again, it's clip. And if I hit play here, you'll notice that there he goes down there. And you can watch it here. Here's the time of that clip. I can go in here if I want the sternwheeler, and I can reposition it as I like. I can scale it as well. So say, for instance, I want it to have a little bit more of a evident sternwheeler here. I could make it bigger. Then again, because this is a layered environment, I can drag it underneath my title, and there's my title, and it comes on. And again, the animation, the speed of the animation really depends on the length of the clip. So you could drag this clip out a little bit longer and be able to see the animation happen a little bit slower. In the background, one of the things you'll notice in the background here is I have a map. So I'll double click on this, and here's my map. That's a clip. This clip is an MPEG-4 file, video file. You'll probably see MPEG-4s and playback MPEG-4 files with QuickTime, for instance. You get those off the web, and some cameras and video cameras save an MPEG-4 format. But what I did is I created an MPEG-4 file here of a pan of a map. So here's a map from the era, and you can see as I scroll through here, you can see the map moving in the whole production. But if I double click and I use my clip capability, here's clip again, I can see the map scrolling here, and you'll notice that there's lakes that these sternwheelers worked on, and it's going through the timeline. Now, how do I make this map? There's a couple of ways of doing this, and it depends exactly on the application that you're doing. So in this case here, I had a very old map that scanned in, and then I brought it into PaintShop Pro and corrected it a bit and cleaned it up, took a bunch of the wrinkles out and this sort of thing. And then I took this map and I brought it into another video production, another VideoStudio session, and animated it. So let me open that right now. Let me open that map, how I made that map file. You can also, if you like, you can bring that map picture into the timeline and say pan and scan, and we have pan and scan of the map. I prefer to make video files because it's a little bit easier to work with, and it's also you can really adjust the smoothness of the pan. So let me just open that project. I'm not going to save this project. And here I have a project called Map Pan. Pretty self-evident project. And so here you have a project that has this panning. You'll notice here that if I look at this clip, the clip is 8 seconds, 8 and a bit seconds long. I can make it longer and shorter if I like. The content within here is this JPEG image, which was the map. So what I did to this map then, you'll notice I still have these effect icons on here. If I double click on this map, you'll notice that one of the things I'm doing is I'm using pan and scan under the edit tab. So when you select the clip, double click on it, you can go in here and color correct, but I've added pan and scan. Now to use the pan and scan, it has a number of defaults that you can pull from, but you can also customize. So you'll pick one of these and you can customize it. So let me go in and customize my pan and zoom. Customize here. Here you go, the original map. It's totally not the same aspect ratio of the video that I'm creating. Also, you'll notice that these lakes are very, very long. This map is very, very tall. So to be able to put the whole map on the screen would be unrealistic. So what I've done, I went into the first keyframe here. You'll notice it's designated by this red X. I'm on the first keyframe. If I go to the last keyframe, again, a red X, but it's on the top here. So I can go in here, and if I hit play, you'll notice that this box is moving, and the output is happening on the side here. To be able to adjust this, you need a keyframed area. So let me go back to my first keyframe and say if I wanted to move my first keyframe, I can say let's just pan it down a little further to the US border, down here where it says boundary. And I can even adjust how much of a zoom I want there. So let me just say right there, I want to zoom it right there. I hit play, and it will basically adjust between that first keyframe and this last keyframe. If I wanted to, I could stop it here, right in this area here, and I could add a keyframe. By adding a keyframe, it gives me a midpoint where I can change the pan zoom. So let me just zoom in, say for some reason I wanted to zoom in this area, and I'll zoom right in, and I'll go to this spot here. And now you'll notice that the path that the zoom is traveling along is curved. and there's a new keyframe in the middle here. So let me go back to the beginning, and I'll hit play. You'll notice now that it's panning and it's zooming in. It's coming in, boom, and there's a spot that I made. And you can also copy keyframes. So for instance, say something, I wanted to concentrate on that area that I had zoomed in right here. I'll go right in this area here, and I'll right click on it, and I'll say copy that keyframe, which is all the parameters that I've set up for that keyframe. And I pan down to an area where I want to paste it, and I'll say, yeah, about that time I want to paste. Now you'll notice that it stopped in that area. So it zoomed in, stopped, and then zoomed out a bit again. Pan and zoom is very, very fun to use. It is a great way in a slideshow to be able to work with photographs, giving a little bit of drama to the photographs as they're moving. And as an advanced point too, as I showed you the sternwheeler before, you can actually pan and zoom alpha channel PNG files to have them get bigger and smaller on screen as well. For instance, that steamboat was knocked out in the background. You can actually have that pan and zoom the steamboat itself. So very, very cool effect. Once you say OK, what will happen here is it'll adopt everything that I want it to. There you can see everything I've done. VideoStudio is very responsive to this. Even though this is a very large image, it's very responsive to pan and zoom. Now, what I wanted to do is I wanted to use a video based on this within another project. And you'll find that you'll be working between projects quite a bit because it's a very simple way and simple workflow to be able to make components for your main video. So to save this out, I'd go to Share, and we have a number of sharing options. You could go up and just take this file, make it into a file, and upload it to the web or burn it to a disk. I just want to create a file that I want to use in my production. So what I'll do is create video file. We have a number of preset formats that you can use, but you can also make up your own format using any of the codecs we have, as well as adjusting the resolution of the file and the frame rate and the bit rate and that sort of thing. But if you don't want to do that, you can go in here and just select one of the presets. I usually use MPEG-4 when I'm working in high def, so here I'll go MPEG-4 HD. Now if I say MPEG-4 HD, you'll notice that it comes up with a number of preset parameters. In this case, I am using a 1920 1080, which is a high def resolution, and 15 megabits per second. H.264 is same as AVC HD. I'm using AAC audio. Everything within this preset will happen. When I set save, it'll render out this file, and then I'll be able to use it in a production in VideoStudio or any other application, or upload it to the web. So that's how I made the pan and zoom of the map. So let's go open that project again. So I'll go back to my lakes project. Don't want to save that. So here's my lakes project. Back again as it were. So as I'm going through the timeline here, here is the map that I made in the other project. So there's the MPEG-4 file. And now I've got these components happening. I've got titles. I've got a PNG file that's panned and animated across the screen. I've got a wash happening here with some old movie effect. We can give a little bit of dust and scratch to the background. And I also have this map video. Now as I pan through here, you'll notice, okay, there's the first years coming up. And here's the first ship, the SS-49. So this was built in Colville, Washington in 1865, and I've got the details. And this is a very simple little production talking about the different sternwheelers that were plying the waters of Arrow Lake of the Arrow Lakes at the time. So that's basically what I wanted to do. So here's some components that we're working on. The first one is the captain. The captain, there was no picture of the ship, but we do have a picture of the first captain. So if I click on this, there's the captain's picture. Again, you can move this around if you like that. I added some frayed edges here. Now this is something that you'll use quite a bit if you do any kind of retrospective or any type of profile. Using a mask on the edges really gives it a neat feeling. So in this case here, if I double clicked on that picture, the image attributes area opens up, and you'll notice that there's a button here called Mask and Chroma Key. So if I go to Mask, you'll notice here's I need to apply my overlay options, which is this is what I want to achieve here. If I didn't use a mask, it would be this rectangular look. Okay, this is pretty straightforward, but I wanted to add a little bit of drama, a little bit of age to it. So I'll say apply the overlay options. I selected mask frame. I could use chroma key, and this is where you would do your green screening. If you wanted to do green screen, this is where you would do that, is in this chroma key area, and you would pick your green screen color. But I'm going to use mask frame in this sense. So here I have a number of default mask frames. I can go in here and preview them. You'll notice that it's changing on the captain there. There's a swirl. I can change whatever I like. Now the interesting thing is you'll notice there's a plus button here. You can make your own masks if you like. You can use CorelDRAW or PaintShop Pro to be able to make a mask within that application. Bring it in and apply it to your photos. So if you have a need for a very customized mask, this is where you would do it. But I'm going to use this standard mask here. The nice thing is that I use the same mask for all my pictures to keep consistent. I don't want to draw away the viewer from the content with a bunch of distracting production pieces. So I've basically used the same mask on every person, and I've also used the same placement for every graphic. As I mentioned earlier, you can copy the attributes of a picture as well, of a photograph or a video, and paste them to another photograph or video, which is very handy. Okay, so that's the mask on this captain. The next thing I did was I wanted to have titles happen over top of this white box. As you can see here, there's the white box happening over that. Let me just move my captain back to where he's supposed to be. One more time, using my undo. Oh, I don't want to do that. So I'll use my redo, and I'll leave it like that. So I've got a white clip here. If I double click on that, you'll notice that under the Edit tab, it's white. It's basically a white swatch that I picked from my graphics area here. So if I go up and I go to my graphic area, there are swatches in this area here. I just dragged it into the timeline like that, and then I just resized it. That's all you got to do is resize it. I also added a bit of transparency. I didn't want it to be a block to startle the viewer, to be able to block out the background. So I added some transparency. To do that, I just double clicked on here, and then I go up here to mask and chroma key again, and I go into my transparency area. So I can change my transparency to whatever I like. And say, for instance, I'll go to 50% here, and there it's transparent for 50%. The next thing I wanted to do was to be able to have this graphic fade on. Now, common to all graphics that you put into the overlay tracks, we do have some very simple presets for fading on, for an effect for the graphic to appear on screen. In this case, I have got fade in, fade out. And as I mentioned before, I'm on the clip mode, and you can see there's the duration, which is the blue, how long the graphic will stay on, and then the amount of fade. I added quite a bit of fade here to give that effect, sort of for a mysterious effect, sort of fade on and fade off. You can adjust this just by dragging these orange markers for the amount of fade. Okay. You can also position this on screen wherever you like, as I mentioned before, using undo to bring it back. And then I have the title here happening on the top, and then I have another title showing the details. Here's the SS49. Double clicking on that allows me to put that title in on this track, and then the details that are here are on this track. I used animation, fade in, fade out. I wanted to be consistent. I didn't want to have too many distracting things happening on the screen. So for instance, all of these pictures that I have here are based on the same effect. Now this is where it's very cool in VideoStudio. If I pan down here, and let me zoom out a bit so you can have an idea of how this is working. Let me just count these pictures. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 pictures. Now to do all of those individually and manually is tedious, and it takes a lot of time. And if you're in a classroom environment where somebody's trying to put something together within a half an hour or an hour, you certainly can't spend your time. You'd rather spend your time on something more productive than having to copy and redo things. So all I did was I set up my first graphic, and I set up my first title exactly the way I wanted. I spent my time on the creative part of this. Then I dragged in another picture into the timeline. What I ended up doing was copying the attributes of this picture, right click, copy attributes, and that will basically copy the mask, the location, the scale, everything. And then you can paste your attributes onto another picture, and you can just put all the same look on every picture. So it's just a matter of saying paste attributes, paste attributes, paste attributes. To do that, I just right click on a picture, and say paste attributes. So I'll say copy first, and then I'll say paste attributes. Very handy. I did the same thing with my box. You might need a little bit of tweaking, you know, in some of these descriptions and names of the vessels. It's a little bit longer, so in which case you might have to adjust the length of the white box. But that's just minor tweaking. It's not major work. And as I scroll through here, you'll notice that I've got photos in the back that are of the era. You know, some really wonderful old photos of a wonderful era that's long gone. We have these two sternwheelers sitting here with all these people on it. And in this case here, I have a sternwheeler. I took in PaintShop Pro, I took that same photo and I sort of copied a section of it and used it as a background as well. The reason is I wanted to see these people. That's one thing you don't see a lot in descriptions of the mechanical things like ships. I wanted to see the people of the time, and I found it intriguing. For instance, the dress this woman's wearing. You know, these things you see, historical things, the dress she's wearing, the workers on this. It has a whole story unto itself. So as I pan through here, you'll notice the different vessels that were involved here. The next thing I did here is I used pan and scan as well on this, except instead of using a separate project to make a video file, I just did pan and scan on a particular JPEG image. So in this case, I dragged in, after correcting this in PaintShop Pro, I dragged in the schedule timetable of the sternwheeler and when, you know, on this May 15th, 1896, their schedule, and I panned it up very slowly like that, just to give it a little bit of tone in the background. And here we go, different ships coming through. And there's a pan and scan on another photo, a town in the background. And I think that gives you kind of a neat feeling, as opposed to just a standard slideshow. It gives you a neat feeling of the time, you know, and it's quite captivating. It's video production with photos more than just a slideshow. So as we go through here, the eras of these ships are coming by, and as you can see, they're getting bigger and bigger, 830 tons. In the background here, I've got a breakfast menu from this ship, talking about all kinds of items that are not fat-free. Scrolling through here in the years, and there's the crew of that last ship, and then the whole thing fades away and comes through with a little bit of a conclusion about what's happened with all these ships, what happened to this bygone time with all these wonderful old ships, and then it talks about the ships that remain as museums in that, and of course credits for where I got all the photos. Finally, from the last part is I used an audio piece which is from an old piano that is the paper cylinder piano that is playing, that was certainly from that era. One of these productions, you use a lot of research, and you obviously as students you want them to learn as much as possible about a subject, and you know, you're always learning every day. So for instance, I found this song that is being played back on a vintage 1895 player piano that has a paper reel inside, and it's playing it back. So it really gives it a good feeling. One of the sayings in video production is that you can forgive the video if there's some issues with the video, but you cannot forgive the audio. So in this case here, I have this music that is era specific, and it actually does add quite a bit of tone to it. If you wanted to add narration, I chose not to add narration to this. I usually do narration in productions, productions such as these, to be able to read along and give it some color in terms of audio annotation, you could say, with my voice. It's very easy to do. The way you would do that is, you'll notice that we have a timeline here with a microphone. The way you do that is you just go to where you want to be in the production. Say at this point here, I wanted to, say, do a voiceover in this part here. Then I would hit the record capture option, and you'll notice here that I have a voiceover. So I click on voiceover. Right away I'll start getting a microphone that tells me to adjust the volume. I hit start, And as I'm talking, it will be recording the audio onto the timeline. If I hit stop, you'll notice there is the audio that I recorded. So very easy to do narration. If you make mistakes, very easy to go back and just delete it, try it again. You can save all of those as audio files if you like. So let me just say Control Z on that. Here I have an audio file. Anything on this timeline can be dragged back into your library. So I have a library here called Arrow Lakes. I can take this audio that I just recorded and drag that back up into my library, and I can use that. Now it's a file that I can use in other applications, or I can sweeten it or whatever I like. And just as you can import to VideoStudio, just using right-click, you can insert media files, photos, audio, music, video. You can also use these in other areas. So for instance, if I go here, I can say right-click, and I'll say locate on my computer, and it will show me where it was, where I captured the audio file. In the library itself, I can scale up the thumbnails, scale them down. I can use a list mode. I can sort by video, photo, or music. If I click on individual pictures, I can go in here and they will preview over on this area here, like that. And these are all the pictures that I have in this production. Once you're done and you wanted to save this, you could save it as a production. It will save it on your folder. One of the problems with video editing or any kind of editing is that you can get assets from all over the place on the network, on different computers, from jump drives, from different hard drives, different folders, and it really becomes a mess because the next time you open up your production, you will find that there's some assets that you just cannot find. What we've added is a smart package capability. So if your student is sitting down there at the desk working on their production and the bell rings or the period's over, they can go to File, Smart Package. Now what Smart Package does is, let me just save as a different name here. And I'll say, for instance, Lakes September. Okay? September, like that. Save. Then I can go in here and I can say Smart Package. Save the current project? Yes. Okay. What it'll ask you to do now is, do you want to pack this as a folder? So what you can use is a jump drive. A student can have a jump drive. Certainly depends on how big the production is, how big of a jump drive you'd need. You could have an external hard drive. It will make a folder on that external device. It will give it a name. So for instance, say this is September 12th, the Lake September 12th project, the project file name. And it will take all the assets that I'm using in this project, everything, and stick them into a folder in another place. So next time, if you go to another computer that has VideoStudio, you can open the project and all your assets will be there. You can also, if you like, zip everything together. So that using WinZip technology, you can say zip the file. If I say zip the file, it's going to come back here and it's going to ask me, do I want to split it over different disks and that sort of thing? But one thing I can do is encrypt it. And that allows me to add a password protect to my project so nobody else can see my project. So this is a very handy way. It will make one file for all your project assets, all your pictures, everything. It will make one zip file, one big zip file that has a password. So this is very, very good for submitting projects, for instance, being able to share projects, put them on the web with a password to be able to give to the teacher without anybody else seeing it. So this is a very good way of packaging up your project. Another thing from an output standpoint, as I mentioned in my other project, I can go in here to the Share tab, and there's a number of output capabilities. Some are output to web. For instance, I can output to web here. I can go to YouTube, Facebook, Flickr, Vimeo, that sort of thing. I can actually record them back to tape if I chose to, if I go to a DV or an HDV camera. I can go and export them to a mobile device like a PDA or a telephone if I want, for some reason, if you wanted to do that. I can also create a disc, so we can create DVDs. You could take this whole production out to a DVD, but if you'd like, you could also take it out to a Blu-ray format on a DVD, which is particularly fantastic because you can play that back from a regular DVD in high def on a Blu-ray player or a PlayStation 3 out to a projector, and it is wonderful quality, absolutely to die for quality. I can create a sound file from all the sounds I have here, and I can also create, as I showed you earlier, a number of video files that you can use. So there's a number of output options. So in a nutshell, that was a project, a video essay that's very straightforward to do. I showed you a number of capabilities of being able to add effects to clips, to photographs, being able to add titles, add effects to titles, being able to import a subtitle file, being able to export a subtitle file using pan zoom on photographs, using old movie filters. This project in its entirety took about 3 hours to make. VideoStudio allows you to work very, very quickly. The rendering is minimal. You can play things back very fast, and this is very, very good if you are in a tight environment like a school where a student has to get something accomplished within a shorter period of time and be able to move on to another machine when he comes back to class without having to rebuild his project half the time. So very good piece of software for education. Please give it a shot, download the trial if you like, and if you have any questions, please give us a call.